On today's episode of Locked On Avalanche, Ross Colton avoids suspension, but he does get fined. We will preview the Avalanche and Kraken and what's still on our minds after that Devils and Avalanche game, which had the Avalanche winning that 6-3. New episode of Locked On Avalanche coming at ya.
Your Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
There we go. How are we doing, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Avalanche podcast. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Chris Maselli. With me, as always, Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. Thank you for tuning in and making this your first listen of the day. That's always appreciated. Make sure to follow us on our social media outlets, LOPN_Avalanche on X, Locked On Avalanche on Instagram. Questions, comments, concerns, and opinions, lockedonavalanche@gmail.com. And follow us on our YouTube channel. Hit subscribe, get notified when a new show goes live, and definitely subscribe to our subtext as well. Link to that is in the show notes below. And when you do, you become a very special insider for Kyle and I. You chat with Mr. Shaggy Von Doom and myself one-on-one and give predictions and anything else that's on your mind that gets read on the air, like we will do later on when we are previewing the Avalanche and the Seattle Kraken. Where we're going to start today, good sir, is kind of going back to that Avs and Devils game, and we'll start with the Ross Colton situation because it did come down that he avoided suspension, which I kind of thought would happen. And I mentioned it in yesterday's episode how because he was given the game misconduct, that kind of served as some sort of suspension. And I didn't think they were going to go any further than that, and they didn't. They gave him the $5,000 fine, which is the maximum that they can give him, which is like change in couch cushions for these guys. So he gets that. I mean, I don't have any issue with that whatsoever. I mean, again, I don't think he intended for his stick to go where it went with Timo Meier, which is into his face, but it did, and you gotta pay the piper if that's what happens.
Yeah, when the dust settled on that hit, and it's kind of a two-pronged instance. You can't just say it's the hit. It was the whole situation. It was the Luke Hughes hit, and then the Timo Meier high stick.
Yeah, I don't think they're fining him for the hit.
Yeah, it was a whole instance. If
right.
You're going to look at one, you got to look at the other because it all kind of fed into each other. Yeah. And like a day removed from that, it's just kind of, it's hockey, baby. And yeah, you absolutely nail it. Like the game misconduct kind of was enough. And honestly, that fine, that team, that roster, that locker room, they probably all just pitched in the locker room and said, "Hey, we got you, bud." That was good. And honestly, it might be like we mentioned it kind of briefly yesterday in the episode. This might be a little like turning point, lightning rod little moment of like because we were talking about individual performances and like how this team needs to band together. And for somebody like Ross Colton and Miles Wood, the game that they both had, this was something they could rally behind, and that showed life. Like we mentioned, like Cale Makar fighting with the refs over the whole instance. Like you could see that team sticking up for each other.
Right.
And that was their first like instance and visualization of a team. So honestly, they probably all just pitched in and said, "Hey, bud, thanks for firing us up. We needed that win." And we go on business as usual.
And Cale Makar said that. He said prior to that game that, we got to have some guys stepping up a little bit more in the locker room, which translates to on the ice as well. And I think he saw that opportunity. I think he saw that moment to go to bat for his guy. And even though when it's not going to lead anywhere, you still speak up because the guys on the bench see that.
Yep.
Right. So, yeah, I think for the fine, I think everybody's okay with it, but I think a lot of people are also asking, the whole whataboutism. And whenever there's a fine that comes or a suspension that comes, I love reading the comments on, X. It's like, what about this guy? And I think there's some legitimacy here to what about Dougie Hamilton?
Yeah.
I didn't like that at all, Kyle. Not one bit. And to me, it was like, I completely understand how you're gonna want to have a dust up, right? Your guy got hit. It was a hard hit, and that's where we are with the sport of hockey. Like, even though it could be the most legal hit you've ever seen, if there's a little bit of extra oomph into it, guys are gonna get into a scrum.
Yeah.
I get it. But the way that it happened with Hamilton, that was a cheap shot. It was dirty. It was uncalled for. It was dangerous. It was check all the boxes of what that was or was not. And yeah, he gets a penalty on it. But, if we're sitting here saying like, oh, that could have been a suspension for Ross Colton, but it wasn't because they kicked him out for the game. But then they revisited it and still gave him a fine. Okay, well, you gave Hamilton a penalty for what he did, and you're saying like that's enough. You're not saying there shouldn't be anything extra for what he did. Did not like it one bit, and to not get looked at all by Department of Player Safety, first of all, is kind of on brand, and second of all, is kind of shameful because that was just as dangerous, and that was intentional.
Yeah.
What Colton did was accidental, and he's deserving of the fine. What Hamilton did was intentional, and he gets away scot-free. I don't really like that.
Yeah, and I think Ross Colton is a little bit of a victim of the social media firestorm, and honestly, the vapid nature of anything of that instance for the Avalanche, because when it comes to the Ross Colton hit and that whole sequence, it's just basically like summed up to that 30-second clip that drives social media as we know it, as you have to check this out. Ross Colton loses his mind on the New Jersey Devils, and the league's not going to like that. They don't want somebody losing their mind. And you can sum up, honestly, Dougie Hamilton's been playing since 1881. This is kind of on brand for him. And it's one of those that it's just it's towing the line of dirty and typical.
Oh, definitely.
But it's kind of swept under the rug and forgotten about when it comes to the Ross Colton quote unquote. For all the audio listeners, there are air quotes in the air.
Yeah.
Like the Ross Colton losing his mind and everybody just kind of clicking and sharing that. I feel like that is something the league wanted to push down a little bit and say, hey, we can't have guys going out here and going just bananas on everybody. The Dougie Hamilton thing, you're going to get night in, night out. And some guys make a career out of it.
Yeah. You had Colton in practice. A few people who follow the Avalanche, like kind of behind the scenes guys, had put up that he was talking on the sidelines with Jared Bednar and very apologetic. It's one of those things where he was like, he said he was like sick to his stomach because if the Avalanche ended up losing that game, he would have taken that to heart, taken that personally. So I think he learns from it somehow. I mean, I think he's still going to defend himself. But I think maybe he just has just a little bit more tighter grip on that stick the next time someone's coming after him, and just kind of cautious of just keep it low, don't go high with the thing. So so he gets to stay in the game because he was a big part of that game up until he got kicked out.
And it's fun. Like Ross Colton has been more physical and more of a threat than Curtis McDermott has in about a year and a half.
Are we surprised there? Not really.
I'm just putting that out there into the ether for everybody who says anytime the Avs get roughed up, it's time to put in McDermott. We're fine.
Even in getting kicked out of the game, I think that was like somewhat of like a coming out party for Ross Colton and the Avalanche fan base, right? And for Miles Wood as well. We kind of expected it to come from Miles Wood just from the way that guy is constructed and how he plays. Colton is a little bit different, but he still plays very hard, and you saw it. And I think maybe even that added to it for the fan base to be like, that's my guy. I can get behind a guy like that. So I think for the two of the new guys, and even Johansson who had a goal in the game.
Yeah,
all the new guys just that maybe collectively that was like, okay, that was maybe when the season's over, we can look back at that game and say that's where most of them. You still got issues with Drouin, Tatar is, still up in the air. But for those three guys who you're expecting so much from, that was a turning point where they really settled in. So I really want to see what happens in this Kraken game. What can they do next? What do they follow that performance up with against Seattle? So I think that was good for them.
That's a valid point, because you don't want Miles Wood to become the new P.E. Belmar, where he only had his incredible games against Vegas. Like, you want Miles Wood to have a great game against somebody other than his former team. So yeah, this Kraken game, let's see if they could build off this momentum.
More than I want to talk about with this game, especially comments from Cale Makar. Had a pretty interesting quote. And Georgiev, what are we looking forward for him going forward? Is he even going to play this game against Seattle? We don't know yet, but we will talk about that coming up next. Right now, we are going to discuss Jace Medical. And Kyle, we live in uncertain times. I don't think there's any question about that. We never know when the next pandemic is going to pop up, when the next hurricane is going to come around. Wildfires are always a thing. It's just an uncertain world that we live in. And you never know when you're going to be removed from your house, from your loved ones, even your medications. So Jace Medical has made this easy. They provide 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. And all it takes to get a Jace case is to fill out a simple online form. And in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of our board-certified physicians, and you get ongoing care from your physicians on any treatment-related questions. Doctor-created, doctor recommended. So don't get caught unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. Jace handles everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. So if you or someone you love would get some peace of mind by having a year supply of any daily med, go to jacemedical.com to see if it is offered to you. And remember to use the promo code locked on just locked on for $20 off of your purchase over at jacemedical.com. Cale Makar, I thought had a pretty interesting quote. I think it was kind of harmless. It was right after the game. And it's just not like bulletin board material or anything like that. But he was just kind of talking about the game and just saying, like, that's how we want to play. We want to play that hard-nosed game, that fast game. And then he said, he acknowledged that the Devils were down 2 very big players in Hughes and Hischier. And he kind of that flowed into the comment of saying, like, I think it'll be very interesting the next time we play these guys. I took that as twofold. Yeah, it'll be interesting if they have those 2 guys back, which you would expect they would, because next time they play is in February. And I also took that as, like, maybe there's unfinished business between these 2 teams and what went down in that second period. So maybe it's just going to be in the back of their heads, because you're not playing them for another 3 months. And maybe by then everything's blown over and maybe Pepperidge Farm does forget. But sometimes hockey players don't. And, maybe Timo Meier won't forget that. I don't think, because Timo Meier never got a chance to get back at Colton, obviously, because he got thrown out. So while what I think Makar was saying, it'll be interesting to see when we match up with these guys because they'll have those 2 guys back. I also thought it meant unfinished business is still on the table here for the Cards.
For everything that game was, it was incredible. It was physical, and all the moves the Avalanche made in the offseason, I mean, it led up to this moment, one of these games where, like, the acquisitions of Wood and Colton and Ryjo, like, you built the team for games like this. I'm also curious, like, unfinished business. Like, Meier, he got his kind of, I guess, justice by tallying a goal in that second period. But I'm also curious what this, like, Cale Makar, I'm looking at it kind of in a flip, like, Hischier and Jack Hughes. That's your leadership.
Sure.
Those are your guys. So I wonder if when they come back, they say, hey, we weren't a part of this the first time, and this is not how we play, because the Devils aren't really a Goonie team. Like, they're honestly the Eastern Conference version of the Avalanche, like homegrown talent and building leadership that way. So I'm curious to see if it's the same type of physical play or if it's more of a run and gun style, which was anticipated if both these rosters were 100%.
Yeah, so we'll see. I think it'll get brought up, I'm sure, the next time that they play, but not as, like I said, I don't think any of it is like bulletin board material. I think it's just players policing themselves, and if there is any carryover from that, maybe there's just a little, a little scrum when the game starts between the two of them. I don't know. We'll see. But I do look forward to a game where the Devils are 100% and have Hughes and have Heischer, because they definitely make it. I mean, Hughes is probably the early favorite right now is for the Hart. I know we're only a dozen games into the season, but dude was on fire. So
magical run so far.
Yeah, he's been great. Alexander Georgiev, we didn't talk about him a ton yesterday, but I thought it was a good game by him. And we don't know if he's going to be starting for the Kraken. Do you feel that he will? I mean, Jed Benner has always said, like, I'm not basing when I'm going to give him rest, or I am basing it just on like how often we're playing. And for a lot of November, it's day off game, day off game. You have a couple times in there where you have 2 days in a row off. And because that's happened now, I would expect him to play against Seattle. I'm not buying into this whole like he's tired thing. And I just feel like Jared Benner wants to have him play his struggles out.
Yeah.
And he feels like he can correct those struggles playing, not sitting. And I agree with that. But again, it is up in the air if he's going to be starting against the Kraken. I would guess that he is for those reasons, because you got a couple of days off here. So why not?
And the way the schedule lines up, you have the Kraken game tonight, and then you have St. Louis, and then Seattle again.
Okay. And when's the Dallas game? Is that next weekend?
You have the next couple games. You have St. Louis, you have Seattle, Anaheim, then Dallas.
Okay. So that's not, yeah. So you do want to kind of time this where he's obviously playing the Dallas game.
Yes.
Right. So I would
play him tonight and then give him the rest Monday on the next time you play Seattle, and let him be rested for that Dallas game that's coming up after that.
Yeah, he's going to want to be rested for that. So, but I thought for this game, you could see him slowly get it. Like, there were a couple goals there that were just very difficult. I didn't think they were bad goals given up by him. So overall, I thought he did well, and he didn't let things get out of hand. He didn't give up 4.
Yeah.
4's been the worst number for the Avalanche so far this year, and he kept him at 3. So I would say that's a positive.
And I think it was that first one. That was a bad angle beat. It was almost like 90 degrees. You take that shot 10 times, I think you maybe hit it.
Yeah.
1. It's so just say like 2, 3. It wasn't 4. So that's good. And a superior offensive talent. Like they're one of the better offensive teams the Avalanche have faced so far. So you could see him improving. That's another reason I would put him in against the Kraken. The Kraken are kind of reeling a little bit. So let him go for maybe 1 goal, maybe 0 without saying the word. Like you want to see him like really tighten it up and build off that. So I don't think he's playing that bad.
As far as this game as a whole, kind of put a bow on that. What is the one thing that you are taking away from this game, from the Devils, a day removed from it, 2 days removed from it, and say like that's a good thing, and that's what I want them to continue on?
We have almost had 2 episodes about the game last night. Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen tallied goals, and it's not who we're talking about. Who would have thought we're doing a Locked On Avalanche episode talking about Ryan Johansson, Ross Colton, and Miles Wood more than we're talking about Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen and Cale Makar. And that's the fantastic wealth of riches that the Avalanche have right now. And you could rely on those guys when needed, but you're getting scoring from the top 3 lines, and that's exactly what you want. And that's how this Avalanche team was built. So everything is beginning to work.
Is it just too easy to talk about them all the time? You know what I mean? Like it's I don't want to take them for granted at all. We have 3 of the top 10 players in the league, and I mean, I think we talk about them plenty. But the funny thing is that what I was going to say, what I took out of this was all the players that bounced back after that Vegas game. You know, we talked about Val Nichushkin. I thought he played a great game following a horrible game.
Yeah,
you did. You had Nathan McKinnon, who was flying. You had Mikko Rantanen with 3 points. Cale Makar with 3 points. So things got back on track. So you like to see that. You played a horrible game in terms of what the score ended up being. How do you bounce back from that? And I thought that's what I took away from this. And that's what you want to see from a championship caliber team. So now you got to continue. You don't want to keep doing that. You don't want to say, hey, we just played a good game. Now we're just going to continue. That'll just happen because we're so good. And then against Seattle, you throw up a goose egg. You don't want that.
It's a good look at what potentially could be a Stanley Cup final.
That would be a fun one. Definitely a fun one. Super fast. Wow, that would be good. But what are you expecting for this game against the Seattle Kraken? We've moved on already from last year. We got that first win against them, early on in the season. So we're playing them 2 more times within the next week. Good Lord. All right. What are we expecting from this game? We're going to get to that coming up next. Right now, we are going to hear from Parkview Advance. And as a business owner, you realize there are times when receivables might fall behind, but that doesn't mean you need to fall behind on vendor payments, payroll, or rent. For more than 25 years, Parkview Advance has helped businesses secure working capital from $5,000 to $1.5 million. Parkview Advance can approve your working capital in as little as 24 hours. It's a much easier process than you might imagine, and we invite the many entrepreneurs that are Locked On NHL and Locked On Avalanche fans to learn more by calling Parkview Advance at 203-675-0071 or go to parkviewadvance.com. And if your business needs working capital, call Parkview Advance today. Parkview Advance, helping businesses with their working capital. Once again, go to parkviewadvance.com. All right. Thank you, everybody, for making this your first listen of the day. That is obviously always appreciated. We will be back tomorrow, obviously, to talk about this very game, Seattle Kraken and the Colorado Avalanche. I think a lot of people are feeling like, or maybe wanting this to be like the new rivalry for the Avalanche. I'm not there yet. And I think this happens a lot when, you have playoff matchups. Those doesn't matter the series. Those are always, rock'em sock'em robots. And then the team that kicks you out, you just dislike them. Yeah. I don't think the Avalanche and the Kraken are there. I think that, whatever happened. They've moved on. It's over with. It's a whole new season. But I will say, the Kraken, there's how we always said, there's just some teams that match up well. I think this is one of those teams, and they showed it. The score was 4-1, I think, in the first game, but it was a lot closer game than that. So what are we expecting here today between the Avs and Seattle?
Yeah, and that's a great point. And as you were saying that, I really haven't given much thought to it, but I might put Seattle up there in that rival spot. Let's just be honest here. The opponent after the Seattle game is St. Louis. Mm-hmm. And those games don't, they're gritty, they're physical, but that rivalry feels kind of like the Detroit rivalry. It's just not as pungent as it used to be.
Which one, with St. Louis?
St. Louis.
Those are division rivalries. Those are always going to be there. And if both teams are like how the Avalanche and Dallas are right now, when you see those two teams play, just because there's a lot more riding on it, you're going to feel like that's more of a rivalry right now than it will be for St. Louis and Colorado. But that doesn't mean St. Louis and Colorado are not going to be going at each other's throats. They absolutely.
And I like Seattle because Burakovsky's over there. You get to see Belmar again. That's where the former Avs go to retire. So Donskoy he's our first. So.
He did retire, yeah.
So it's nice. I enjoy those games, and honestly, with how this game shapes up, the Devils game was great. That's wonderful, magical. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a shutout. You did what you had to do. Do the Avalanche take a breath and pat each other on the back and say, "All right, now we're cooking."
No,
or you would want to see the Avalanche step it up just a little bit more. There's a vast difference between the Devils and the Kraken when it comes to talent and where they're sitting in the season. It would be,
do
the Avalanche keep pushing, or is this another frustrating game?
No, like I don't think they're built that way. I think they know what they just went through, and I mean, look what they had the back-to-back shutouts on the road, and then they came back and won, and then after that they got shut out again. So I don't think they're going to have this mindset of like, oh, we won, we've righted the ship. They know they need to have more consistency. So I don't think Jared Bednar would allow them to really kind of like take a back seat.
No, and that's what I'm hoping and wanting out of this team. Like, everything that you put together against New Jersey, turn it up to 11 because that's louder than 10, and really crank it up against Seattle.
Yeah. Minutes before we recorded here, the Seattle Times put out Jordan Eberle was taken to the hospital for an MRI for suffering a deep skate blade cut to the leg in practice. So, and I think that was in Denver where they was practicing in Denver. So, I think they called up Shane Wright because of that. So that was a call up, and people were wondering why. And then after that, this came out. So, I mean, with the state of hockey right now and cuts and stuff like that, this seems like it's on his leg, but it's still a quote deep skate blade. So you obviously hope the guy's okay. But I think when this stuff happens, people are watching this a little bit more closely now, obviously. So he won't be there for that game against the Avalanche, obviously. So hope he's okay. Other than that, so you mentioned former Avalanche players playing for Seattle. One of those guys obviously is Philip Grubauer.
Never heard of him.
He's been splitting time. With apologies if I'm not pronouncing his last name because I'm not too familiar with. It's either Joey Dacord or Dacord. I don't know where the emphasis is on the syllable in his last name, but
masterfully done.
They've basically been splitting time. Grubauer has 7, Dacord has 6 games played. And I was listening to a couple hockey shows thinking like Grubauer might have lost this starting role, or they might just split more time to see maybe who takes control of it. And it doesn't seem like it's Grubauer right now. So I don't know who's going to start for Seattle, but either way, that seems to be maybe a little bit of an issue on their end right now.
The Seattle Kraken have a lot of issues, and it's one of those back to the Georgiev comments.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to have a goalie that you can rely on night in and night out, because everything in front of the goalie kind of falls apart. And you can look at Seattle where you really don't know what you have in goal. Like you're seeing what's going on in Edmonton right now when it comes to goalies.
Nightmare.
Like that's the first place that you look to. Like as long as your goalie is solid, you can build off that, and the defense works off that. And then once the defense is solid, then you can work with your forwards. Like if Grubauer is not, which I anticipate him starting against the Avalanche because that's typically how it goes. Because you could have that Grubauer against his former team conversation. That's always fun.
Yeah,
but he really needs, and that's something the Avalanche need to look out for. He really needs a win like this against a team like this. So you expect Seattle to be on their best, but everybody knows how to get at Grubauer, and you get out early, get out often, and pun intended, let an avalanche of goals on him, and you got this game.
As far as forwards go, you always hear people saying how Seattle is a deep team. They are, and they roll out 4 lines, but at what cost? And you look at the stats for their forwards, even their defensemen, they're all of them in there. There's not a guy in this team that's a point per game player. James Schwartz leads the team. They've had 13 games played, and he leads the team with 11. That's not like horrible. I'm not saying that's close, but you don't have any on your team that's a point per game player. So that's the problem with Seattle, is where does the scoring come from? Matty Beniers is struggling.
Yeah.
So he's got a little bit of sophomore slump going right now. He doesn't have a single goal. He's got 6 assists. That's obviously all his points. And he's a -12, which is far and away the worst on the team. So when he's out on the ice, take note, because whatever the reason is, he's goals are happening against Seattle when he's out on the ice. So, there's a little bit of a sophomore slump for him, and Seattle just is not off to the start that people expected them to be. I think just because they made the playoffs last year, people were thinking like, oh, they'll just get better, and they haven't. They're not horrible right now. What's their? I think they're they're right behind Anaheim. They're 4-6-3 for 11 points, but they've lost their last two. They're streaky. They opened the season losing 4, and they finally won 1, lost 1, lost 2, won 2, and then lost the last 2. And those last 2 that they lost, Calgary and Arizona. So you just have no clue what you're getting from this team right now.
And you mentioned the Kraken can roll 4 lines, and that's great. You should. You're an NHL team. The Avalanche roll 3 top lines, to be honest with you. Like, lines 1 through 3 for the Avalanche could be line 2, and line 3 could be a top line for the bottom 15 teams in the league. So it's nice the Kraken can have talent where they can roll out 4 lines, but it's not Vegas. Their quality is, it's what the Avalanche are built for games like this, that they can really just hammer it on teams like this, and like to rely on guys like Vince Dunn or like your defensive quarterbacking, it's not enough. And I really feel bad for Seattle because it was such a Cinderella story for their playoff run last year, and to see them follow it up with a start like they are having, expect them to be big time dealers at the deadline, trying to put this team together to give some kind of output for the playoffs. But this is one the Avalanche need to take, because this is one that is primed for the Avalanche to make a statement. They can't let this one through their fingers.
People on subtext chiming in. Vargar, 4-3 win in overtime. Does he like overtime games? I feel like every one that he's thrown out there has been an overtime win.
He loves that bonus hockey.
Both teams should be up for the game. Seattle has been disappointing so far, but they shouldn't be taken lightly. I think the special teams gets the job done in the end. I just hope Georgie continues to get his groove back, because the season hangs on him. So that's what Vargar's thinking. James, I really want Nichushkin to get 1 tonight. It would be nice to see him get something, and on Seattle, no less. Yeah, I think there's always going to be some sort of connection between those two. I think it would be a fun game to watch. Lots of back and forth with either a lot of goals or ending with very little goals. You're towing the line there, James. You're either saying there's a lot of goals or not a lot of goals. It can only go.
Could be a little, could be a lot. Could be the best jersey in hockey. So
it's one of them. Got to admit. Madam Battle Axe says 5-2 Avalanche. So that one's not going to go to overtime.
No, I'm leaning towards Madam Battle Axe. That 5-2 feels right about where it should be.
All right. So the top line is going to give a good show. She can feel it. I think 3 goals will come from the top line. Colton is growing on me. As long as he's not suspended, which we know he is not, I think he'll get another goal. Ride that wave. On LOC, she's calling it out. It's due for another shorthanded goal.
You heard it here first.
All right. If that happens, all the credit goes to Madam Battle Axe. And Easton, 3-2 Kraken. I give Easton credit. I like that. I like that. I mean, the Avalanche can't win them all. So Easton is he's feeling this is a Kraken win, and he says the Avs goals come by way of Lehkonen and Mikko Rantanen. So
I see what you're doing, Easton. And Grubauer would get a shootout, right? I mean, a shutout. I get it. I see what you're doing. Galaxy Brain.
There you go. So if you want to be part of that, subtext link is down in the show notes. Sign up. And we'll get your predictions on each game. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today, everybody. So we will be back tomorrow to talk about this one. Hopefully an Avalanche win. We'll see what's in the cards. So he is Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. I am Chris Maselli. Thank you for tuning in and making the Locked On Avalanche your first listen of the day. Enjoy the game, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.